Hello everyone and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Thursday, August 18th, and I'm your host, Nathan Solomon. In today's show, we'll bring you some great content with incredible guests from around the world, so stay tuned. As always, I'll start with our Techstrong news recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines from around the world. Then, Alan sits down with Jonah Cowell, CTO at Logs.io. Alan and Jonah talk on a number of trends related to the observability and security industries. Next, Alan speaks with Mohammed Kazem, researcher for With Secure Intelligence. In this interview, the two talk about a new info-stealing malware called Ducktail that targets marketing and HR professionals through LinkedIn spear phishing campaigns to hijack Facebook business accounts. We then bring you to RSA, where Charlene sat down with Loris Degiani, CTO and co-founder of Sysdig. Loris gives Charlene info about the company and discusses modern security tips. Next, we have an episode of View with Vizard. Mike interviews Cloudera CTO Ram Venkatesh as he explains why the time has come for an all-in-one data lake as a service. We're then joined by our very own Cody J. Brown, who will hop on to tell us about some upcoming webinars. We then go to KubeCon Cloud Native Con, where Mitch met with Michael Ferranti, CMO at Teleport. Mitch and Michael talk about Secure Access and Machine ID, a service that delivers identity-based access and audit for infrastructure resources. Then, we'll wrap up with two more episodes of View with Vizard. In the first, Mike interviews Peter Brass, VP of Sales at Lightbeam AI, and PD Prasad, co-founder and chief product officer of Lightbeam AI. The leadership of Lightbeam AI explains how the open-source data trustee security model advances data privacy automation using AI. In the second interview, Mike sits down with the newly appointed Logic Monitor CIO, Ryan Warrable, as he provides some perspective on the state of Devops maturity within IT organizations. That's what we have coming up for you here on Techstrong TV. Let's get the show started. Enjoy.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for August 18th. First up in the news, it seems like social media companies are taking a different approach to the upcoming U.S. midterm elections. TikTok recently announced that it will be launching an election center to help people find voting locations, as well as fact-checking and banning political advertisements. Meanwhile, platforms such as Meta and Twitter are keeping in line with what was implemented in the 2020 voting season, one that was riddled with controversies and conspiracies. With the different approaches, it'll be interesting to see how misinformation and controversy affects this voting season. Next up, Amazon workers from a warehouse in upstate New York have filed for a union election. The petition was filed for a warehouse known as ALB1, approximately 10 miles southeast of Albany. This push toward unionizing is backed up by the same grassroots labor group that secured the first union labor victory of Amazon warehouse in Staten Island. This petition comes from recent scrutiny of Amazon's treatment of its warehouse workers. We'll have to wait and see how this plays out, as more and more workers are filing for unions and fighting for their rights. Next in the news, Tencent, the $370 billion Chinese tech giant, has posted its first ever revenue decline. The Tencent missed its both revenue and profit forecast for the quarter as well. China's recent restrictions and regulations regarding video games has impacted Tencent, as gaming makes up a third of its revenue. Additionally, the resurgence of COVID in China has slowed down the economy with lockdowns. This has caused revenue from fintech and business services to grow less than expected. However, Tencent has stated that it expects its earnings to pick back up as the Chinese economy begins to recover. In other news, American Airlines has agreed to buy 20 supersonic jets and put down a deposit on planes that are still on the drawing board. American Airlines will become the second airline to plan on using supersonic planes, with United Airlines making a similar announcement last year for 15. Supersonic planes failed to catch on 20 years ago in spite of its fast flight time due to prices for both passengers and airlines being too high. However, Boom Supersonic, the maker of these supersonic planes, insists that when the planes debut, airlines will be able to run them profitably. Airline companies are expected to start using supersonic planes in 2029, but we'll have to wait and see if this innovation catches on. Next, Airbnb will be rolling out anti-party technology in the US and Canada. This technology will examine the renter's history, how far they live from the home they want to rent, and how long they are renting, among other factors. Airbnb says that the technology is designed to prevent a request from ever reaching the host of a party. This technology has already been tested in Australia, where it dropped unauthorized parties by 35%. This measure is in large part due to growing pressure to clamp down on parties since 2019, when a Halloween house party in San Francisco ended with 5 people dead in a shooting. On Digital CXO, we have an article discussing the best practices for automation and digital transformation. Digital transformation can mean many things to many different companies, but there are particular actions that give the biggest bang for a company's buck. Some of these best practices are moving to a subscription model, making all the systems talk to each other, and verifying the tool is fit for purpose. To learn more about these practices, go to Digital CXO. On Container Journal, we have an article discussing Red Hat's update to its OpenShift Platform Plus, which provides new management and security capabilities. This newest iteration of OpenShift Platform Plus is based on Kubernetes version 1.23. This update adds support for pod security and mission integration, and it can now deploy and manage up to 2,500 single-node OpenShift clusters. To learn more about the new update, go to Container Journal. Finally, on Devops.com, we have our first ever weekly DevOps job report. Devops.com will be highlighting 5 great DevOps job opportunities each week to help DevOps professionals advance their careers. The job postings selected are based on the company looking to hire, the vertical industry segment, and the pay scale being offered. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV interview. I am happy to have back on the show my scuba diving, globe-trotting, observability, open source, security aficionado, Jonah Cowell. When he's not doing all of those things, Jonah's the CTO over at Logs. Hey Jonah, welcome.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate you having me on. Always great to catch up.
Absolutely. So just to take care of a little personal business, you just got back from, is it Dominica, right? Where you went on a little scuba vacation?
Yeah, Dominica. It's a small Caribbean island in the kind of the French islands over there. It's pretty unpopulated, unspoiled, and yeah, nice little place to visit for sure.
Cool. Hope you had a great time. Jonah, I want to jump into stuff, but before we do, in case anyone out here is not familiar with Logs, you want to give them a quick kind of background?
Yeah, definitely. So Logs.io is a cloud observability company. We started out being basically the hosted scalable ELK stack for logging. We've expanded, we built a SIEM on top of that. So we have a security product that's been out for close to 3 years. And more recently, we built a metrics product based on Prometheus and a tracing product based on Jaeger. So we're very open source centric, extremely high scale platform. And we really just make it easy to run open source that your teams already love and know. More easily across the organization. So that's what we do.
As long as you mention it, we might as well mention you're also very involved with the Jaeger project and CNCF.
Yeah, we work in a few different communities. The big one is OpenSearch, which we worked along with AWS on. That is an open source version of the Elk stack because that's now proprietary. And the other is Jaeger with the CNCF. For those of you that are going to KubeCon, I'll be doing the Jaeger maintainer talk with one of the other maintainers, but we built quite a few interesting things in Jaeger over the last year and a half, and the project's definitely been evolving more towards an APM tool versus just a tracing and troubleshooting tool. So it's definitely getting better, and everything we do is in the open source. You can use it today with Prometheus and Jaeger together. So.
Excellent. And just for anyone wondering out there, KubeCon is coming up. I think it's in October. It's in Detroit, Rock City this year. It's hard getting hotels there already. So if you're planning on going to KubeCon, go make your hotel reservation sooner than later. Jonah, thanks for the background. I wanted to talk today about sort of the unwritten connection, or maybe it's a written connection, or maybe someone has a blog coming out about it, between observability and security, right? A lot of people say, well, observability is observability. It reminds me of the old saying, right? All spaghetti is macaroni, but not all macaroni is spaghetti, right? Security is inherently attached to observability, and there's obvious security implications in doing observability. However, observability could be more than just security. I think obviously as well. But You're the expert. Tie it up for us, Jonah.
Yeah. So when you go back a little bit, security teams are very different than operations teams, who used to be different than development teams. And now we've kind of brought together development and operations into DevOps, but we still have security that's separate. And so the challenge now is, because of continuous release, where we're pushing into production constantly, security now has to be embedded into that process of automation, because you can't keep up with the rate of change if you try to do it manually or you're dealing with it after the fact. So, as you've heard from many companies and vendors on your digital properties over the last few years, DevSecOps has been this big push of injecting security into DevOps and how we converge the teams. But I think the fundamental change that needs to happen, which is probably going to take many, many years, is how do we get these teams better integrated? But shorter term, how do we educate DevOps teams on the things that they need to pay attention to during their day-to-day work? And it's a big challenge for security teams that are usually a minuscule portion of the size of the DevOps team. So.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, and so one of the ways of scaling that, of leveraging the limited resources of security teams is software tools, right?
Yep.
Tools like
Logs,
where we're taking these observability tools that the ops and DevOps teams are familiar with, and bring it. Not that the security functionality was never there, because one may argue that SIMS, which is a clear security tool, was really a logs collector, observability tool forever. But we're taking those security angles, if you will, right, and bringing them, front and center in a way that DevOps teams can use them, can more easily digest them. They make more sense to them, if you will. Fair?
So we sell our security products more to security teams, and our observability tools to observability teams. The interesting thing is that if I go back 6 months, we only had a handful of customers that were actually using both together, because the budgets are different, the teams are different, they have different requirements. They like the fact that their security tool speaks a security language. and that their observability tool speaks more of a software engineering language in terms of the UI and what things are called and how you deploy it. So it's definitely a challenge to bring them together. But now, as companies are scrutinizing the number of vendors and how much they're paying, and they realize that by combining the use cases on both sides, they can actually reduce their spend on both sides, because you don't need to collect the data twice, send it twice, store it twice, pay for it twice. Probably 30% of the data overlaps. 70% of it is developers don't need firewall logs.
Right.
Similarly, security teams don't need all of the application debug logs. So there is definitely separate data sets that either team needs, but there's a lot of commonality in between too. So
do you see logs selling a unified product, if you will?
For organizations that think that way, and usually it's what I would call, once the company gets big enough to where they need a SIM, usually it's like 400 people or so, that you sort of start thinking about, oh, I have too much data and I need to correlate it. That's usually where it starts. And then as the company kind of starts to think about the way that they manage security up to, a couple of thousand people, they see efficiencies in bringing it together. When you get to really large enterprises, these budgets and silos become like way bigger and more complicated. So I don't see the convergence on our really large enterprise customers, even though there's a couple of exceptions there. But in that sweet spot where it's like 1,000 employees, somewhere around there, a tech company, security often rolls into the CTO the same way that DevOps teams and software engineering teams do. And the CTO will often say, you guys have to work better together. Let's solve this problem, and kind of push towards doing something that's more uniform so that they can have a commonality between the different teams.
John, I go back to my time when we still secure a company I co-founded. And it was vulnerability management, network access control, and we had intrusion prevention. But we had this concept of dashboards, right? And that dashboard views were different, right? A security admin, who was deep in the bowels of vulnerability scanning, had a very different dashboard than the CIO did, or the CISO, an executive team did. A manager had a different dashboard than a doer, a single, single practitioner kind of person. I foresee a similar thing here, where, look, you have this body of data that you're collecting. What slice of it you want and how you want it displayed, that's for smart software developers to come up with the right views for the right personas.
Yeah, a lot of what SIM is actually content. So we have a team of security analysts at our company that build content and integration so that when you send data from your Palo Alto firewall, we've got all the rules, the best practices, the dashboards, the views that the security team expects to see. That happens a little less in DevOps, where packaged content isn't as popular in general. It's still somewhat useful for big things like Kubernetes or Kafka or things that we deploy. But in security, content is king. Like, we ship, I think, about 600 out of the box dashboards. We deal with the rules. What are the best practices of dealing with that data? What should I be alerted on? A lot of what the SIM is actually content, honestly, and a handful of features that we built on top. But the content is really what people expect, because when they send the data, they want it to be parsed and normalized, and you want to get alerts, and you want those dashboards so that you can make sure that you're looking at the right thing.
Agreed. Very cool. So, that's certainly a big trend. around observability and SIM. But you know what? I mean, for instance, tomorrow, well, by the time people see this, it'll be past tomorrow. But August 10th, we're doing a virtual event, Cloud Native Day. And when we look at the mega trends around driving cloud native, I mean, obviously Kubernetes is still Kubernetes, right? No one's saying no. But the whole observability piece of it around Prometheus and Lightstep and some of the other just huge projects, data collectors, if you will, that are driving observability continue, high trajectory growth and everything else. Jonah, where does it end? Is there a peak? What do you think?
There's always more data that's useful. So right now in Open Telemetry, which is the big data collection project, it deals with logs, metrics, traces. These are kind of the foundational pieces. But the project's hard at work on the next data set, which is profiling. So profiling helps a lot with troubleshooting complex problems and gives you an extra layer of visibility. And I expect that there's going to be more and more signals that we're going to bring into Open Telemetry that then we're going to have to deal with on the back end in terms of analyzing it, visualizing it, providing the insights into the data. So I don't think there's ever going to be really an end to the data. And similarly, I think over time, we're going to have new use cases built on top of the telemetry data. So kind of what we're doing right now with our SIM, I think is going to evolve considerably in terms of the way that we bring together both of those views for teams that start to be more cross-functional. So I think the projects in general are going to continue accelerating in terms of different data sets. And there's lots of good innovation that's happening out there in the communities that are going to unlock new ways of analyzing and collecting data too. So I think there's a lot more to come for sure. And a lot of exciting entrepreneurs out there building some of the next gen stuff that, hopefully will be well adopted in the coming years. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Jonah, we're about out of time. Thanks for stopping in. I'm sure you're kind of globetrotting. We got you for a minute here at home in Florida. Stay in touch with us. If nothing else, we'll certainly see you at KubeCon, but maybe we'll touch base before then.
Sounds great. Looking forward to Detroit. Definitely.
You know what? We didn't mention logs.io, right? It's logz.io.
Yep.
For people who want to get up your game. It's hard to read the logs there, Jonah.
I know, it's really small. And also, we have the Open Observability podcast you can find on YouTube, where we talk to open source centric projects and leaders.
Very cool.
So yeah, it's always great.
All right. Jonah Cowell, Logs.io here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break and we'll be back in just a moment.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome to Techstrong TV. Got another interview here for you now with a first-time person on our show. I wanted to introduce you to Mohammed Kazem. His friends call him Kazem, so if it's okay, we're going to call him Kazem as well. Mohammed is with Secure. Two widths there. He's with Secure. And for those who aren't familiar, with Secure was actually formerly part of F-Secure, but Mohammed maybe can tell us about that. Kazem, welcome to Techstrong TV. Nice to have you on.
Hi, Alan. Thank you for having me. I'm Mohammed Kazem. Yeah, people usually call me Kazem. And yeah, I've been working with Secure as a security researcher for 4 years now, ever since graduating. And I've been doing threat analysis and threat intelligence and detection engineering ever since then. And I'm quite excited to be here and to talk to you today about an interesting piece of research that we've been working on for the past couple of months.
Very cool. You know, Mohammed, there are people watching this out there who have also recently graduated, well, maybe not 4 years ago, but have recently graduated with some sort of cybersecurity training. And, you know, all we hear about is there's so many job openings in cybersecurity. But yet there are a lot of people who are just coming out of school with cybersecurity training who can't seem to get those jobs. One of the biggest questions we hear is how do I get my first job? How do I break into this business? It sounds like, you know, 4 years ago that was where you were. If you wouldn't mind helping some of the folks out here, what advice would you give them?
Sure. I know it can be difficult to sort of get your foot in the door and sort of start your journey in cybersecurity. But I think one great way, and the way that I started, was through internship. And that sort of like I didn't graduate as a cybersecurity individual. I studied software engineering, but cybersecurity piqued my interest, and that's how I started as an intern in F-Secure. And I think that's a great way because you sort of get a pretty wide scope of the field. And also, like with Secure, we have a lot of junior openings, and every now and then we have internship positions that open up. So you can always give it a shot. And the entry level for like internship and junior positions would like usually be for people that have just graduated from universities.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So, Kazem, let's talk a little bit about the research you've been working on lately.
Sure. So maybe I can give you a little bit of a story on how it all started. So a couple months ago, basically, one of our NDR clients came across a suspicious sample that they sent to us for analysis. And once we analyzed the sample, we quickly identified that it was an information stealer malware. And I mean, information stealer malware are quite common. Usually what they do is they scan or enumerate the victim's machine and try to steal as much information as they can. Sometimes they're targeted, and that's what the case was here. So it was a Facebook-centric malware. So while it acted as a general information stealer, it was primarily interested in stealing Facebook-related information. And Facebook-centric malware is relatively uncommon. There have been some scenarios in the past, like the Copper Stealer or Silent Fade campaign, which was actually discovered by Meta security team themselves. And in that case, it was also targeting the Facebook business and ads platform. And there was a report that suggested there was around $4 million in financial damage done by that campaign. So it's a pretty lucrative vector. But once we got the sample and we analyzed it, there were a couple of interesting features that piqued our interest and set it apart from these previous Facebook malware and information stealer. First, it was an unknown malware. We weren't able to attribute it to any threat actor or any known malware family or campaign. Second, it was using .NET Core and using its single file feature, which is basically unheard of for malware. And third, it was trying to directly hijack a Facebook business account from the victim's machine, which was, again, unheard of. In, for example, Silent Fade case, it didn't try to hijack the Facebook business account, but what this malware tried to do is basically try to add the threat actor's email address with the highest privilege as an administrator. So basically trying to get root access in essentially to the business account. And these basically got us interested to start tracking the campaign and investigating further. And what we found was that the threat actor had been actively developing and distributing the malware since basically the second half of 2021. And it started as a malware that was written or using the traditional .NET framework, but the threat actor had evolved and moved to using .NET Core. And what made it, and it had basically been lurking in the dark for over a year. And one of the main reasons, among other, was that it is targeted in nature, while the previous campaigns like the Copper Stealer and Silent Fade were distributed through potentially unwanted application and bundles like cracked software. This threat actor was directly targeting its victims.
So let's dive in here a little bit. So first of all, we have some folks here who are more on the developer side than the security side. And when we talk about hijacking a Facebook page or a LinkedIn group or something like that, what we really mean, right, is that somehow or another the malicious entity takes over the administration of that Facebook or LinkedIn property, or it could be a Twitter account too, I guess, or YouTube or any account, like that. They hijack the account in that they become the administrator, and oftentimes once they become the administrator, they'll lock out the legitimate administrators, so it's not easy to go take back control of that page. Number one. Number two, you're saying this was done in .NET. Does that mean it was only aimed at Windows users, not Mac or Linux or anything?
Yeah, so to sort of dive into the first point you mentioned, so basically the threat actor is interested in the Facebook business and ads platform, and what basically they try to do is get an admin access with finance editor role. And the threat actor's history, motives, and the technical indicators that we've seen suggest that what the threat actor is interested in, because with an administrator role, you're basically able to, as you mentioned, lock out the actual administrators from the business and blackmail them. But what we believe the chain of evidence suggested is that the threat actor was interested in using the linked financial payment methods of those business accounts to run their own malicious ads and use this for monetary gains. Because and that's one of the reasons, it also makes sense because it has been lurking in the dark for quite some time. And if they were to block out the administrators and try to make a lot of noise, that would ring a lot of bells. And obviously, if the business contacts the Meta, they could gain access back to the account. So it doesn't really make sense for them to want to block out the administrator, but rather quietly run their own malicious ads using the payment methods, because you can imagine some big corporations could be spending tens of thousands of dollars maybe per month on ads, and a couple $1,000 extra wouldn't really ring any bells, but it would be. But for the threat actor targeting, let's say, hundreds of organizations, they would be making a lot of money from this. And regarding the usage of .NET, so while .NET Core offers cross-platform, the malware that was used in the ducktail operation specifically targeted Windows.
Yeah. And how was it delivered? You mentioned, prior kind of malicious takeover malware was delivered, hidden in cracked software. How is this one delivered?
Yeah, so based on the telemetry and the incidents that we had investigated, we found out that all of the organizations that were targeted operated on the Facebook business and ads platform, and all of the individuals, the victims themselves that were targeted, all had LinkedIn, and and our detection and response team had also handled some incidents where the malware was delivered through LinkedIn to the victims. So it basically used a more targeted or spear phishing attack rather than some other common distribution methods like malicious spam campaigns. And again, this makes also perfect sense for the threat actor, because with malicious spam campaigns, for instance, what the threat actor tries to do is send out the malware or distribute the malware to as many people or recipients as possible and hope that they hit the right target. But here, by targeting individuals within businesses and companies that might have access to this to this Facebook business account, you're basically limiting your scope and increasing your success rates, as well as remaining under the radar. Because once you start distributing this malware widely, it's going to be picked up rather quickly by the security industry and by Meta, for example. And we saw some of the individuals that we saw were targeted, all were either part of the digital media or digital marketing, human resource roles, and managerial roles, which basically indicated that the threat actor would only target first businesses that did operate on Facebook business and ads platform, and only individuals that might have had access to the Facebook business account of that company, that would allow them to basically invite themselves or open the door for the threat actor to come in and add themselves as an administrator.
Interesting stuff there. Interesting. So, Mohammed, this, just so we're clear with our audience, this was delivered via like LinkedIn messaging and stuff like that, where they would target someone specifically because they already knew he had Facebook kind of access, and they'd go on LinkedIn and send them a message, but people had to click the link to download the malware.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you mentioned the name Ducktail. This is something, and I'm sure a lot of our audience probably has no idea. How did you come up with the name? You know, all these malware programs are given names and ransomware gangs and stuff. Where'd you guys come up with Ducktail here?
Yeah, in this scenario, I mean, Alan, I know like it's quite exciting or quite interesting, like how the malware campaign is named, but in this case, it doesn't really have any profound meaning. Like we basically, it's basically a spin-off of some of the artifacts we saw while conducting this investigation. So it doesn't really have any profound meaning.
Got it. Let me go back up to 50,000 feet, because is this the kind of stuff that keeps you excited, that brings you to work every day, that makes being a security researcher worthwhile for you?
Yeah, I mean, like analyzing malware and like trying to find these, like uncovering these sort of campaigns is definitely one of the things that makes this job very interesting and exciting, because I mean, we're out here to protect the people people and businesses in the digital space, and that's what we do. Like I mean, it's all the technical nitty-gritty reversing and technical stuff that sort of gives the excitement. But once you manage to uncover these campaigns and help protect people, that's sort of what makes you sleep well at night, that you're having an impact in the digital space for people and businesses, because cybersecurity is more relevant today than ever, and everyone operates in the digital space these days. So yeah, that's the exciting part of the job.
Very cool. Hey, one last question for people who maybe want to get more information on Ducktail. Where is there an easy URL, or should they just go to the opening page? Where can they get more info?
Sure. So the Ducktail research is published on our labs blog. So you can just search for Ducktail with Secure in Google, and I'm sure it'll show up as one of the first links. And yeah.
Check it out. Hey.
Yeah.
Kazam, thank you, Mohammed. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate the hard work you're doing too, right? It's security researchers like you who, try to keep us as safe as we can in these crazy times. Thanks for what you do. Thanks for coming on Techstrong TV, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you. Take care. See you.
All righty. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong. We'll be back in just a moment.
Devops.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. Devops.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. Devops.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. Devops.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Techstrong TV.
All right, welcome back to Techstrong TV live at RSA Conference here in San Francisco. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I've been having so many great conversations today. I wish you were here to hear these conversations, but I'm glad you're tuning in to see them virtually. We have another great conversation coming up. This one is with Loris Dejiani. I got it.
Very good.
So excited. Loris is the CTO and co-founder over at Sysdig, and you guys are firmly in the cloud-native Kubernetes containers space, correct?
Correct. So Sysdig offers a full feature security platform, which is essentially the leading platform for security for modern applications that run in the cloud. In particular, we focus on cloud infrastructure security, container and Kubernetes security, and everything that has to do with the life cycle and securing the life cycle of modern applications that are running on the cloud.
Excellent, excellent. And I've been having so many conversations with folks about cloud native technologies. And it's really fascinating to me because the collective cloud native community, seem to be focusing a lot on the application development, not so much on the application security of cloud native applications. So where do you see the space right now?
I think it's changing. It's changing quickly. Talking about cloud native, I was at KubeCon in Valencia a couple of weeks ago, not too long ago. And it was interesting for me to notice how even in a conference that is typically, DevOps oriented, there were a lot of conversations about security. There was a lot of interest. I think it's like phases, right? Initially, you need to figure out your stack. So you care more about, which technology do I pick? How do I get my team out to speed with this technology? How do I get the right resources lined up and so on? And then, when people start actually using this and maybe using it in production, it's like, oh, okay, my sensitive data is relying on this. My applications and the health of these applications and the security of the applications relies on this. So there's a second way when people sort of, realize how important this is and they start making true investment. And that's what I'm seeing it's happening around this phase.
Well, that's good. I mean, that to me, that shows that there's a real maturation happening. The market is maturing. The whole cloud native community is really coming into its own, if you will, and recognizing that it's not just about the units, if you will, the containers or Kubernetes or service mesh or all of the different cloud native technologies. You really have to look at it holistically, and security needs to be a larger part of that conversation. So, and as part of that, I imagine you guys are talking a little bit more, maybe hopefully, about API security as part of that as well. So, I mean, where do you kind of see that coming into the conversation?
Yeah, API security, and I mean, it's really like a chain that is made of many rings, right? And you need to make sure if only one of these rings is weak, then your whole posture is weak. So really, especially in the cloud, because very often, at least for what I'm exposed to, Sysdig tends to talk to users, both open source and commercial users. They tend to be typically either at the beginning or in the middle of a digital transformation. And the transformation is the transformation to the cloud, right? Using cloud native technologies is essentially a tool to transition applications that were living in the data center traditionally, and now they're living in the cloud. And there are many aspects to that. There's API security. There's shiftless security and like code security and container image security. There's vulnerability management. There's runtime security, which is very important. There's security postures. There's forensics. And what's interesting is that the transition to the cloud is radical enough that all of this changes in a quite dramatic way, in a way that not only typically what you are doing in the past doesn't work anymore because the paradigm is so different, but also that if you approach this too much vertically, then you are not really covered. So for sure, API security and many other things are sort of, like converging, and we're seeing even just in terms of community, the Cloud Native Foundation, becoming a little bit like the certifier for what the proper stack should be for this.
And it's amazing to me to see how attitudes are changing toward cloud native technologies. And I think when we first started talking about containers, everybody thought, well, they've got to be secure because they're stateless. Why wouldn't they be secure?
Nothing is happening inside them.
And that has been the biggest fallacy. We've all learned that is so incorrect. That and I think a lot of companies maybe learned a hard lesson that way. But we are, the more we understand the technology and the way that the components all work together, I think the better we understand that security really does need to be a very large part of the conversation. And as I said before, kind of holistic part of the conversation.
Yeah, and one thing that you're exactly right. At the beginning it was like, okay, containers isolate the different components of the application. So, now everything is secure and everything is immutable. I don't need security anymore. In practice, security actually risk, because security is about reducing risk. You cannot remove risk, right? You only reduce it. And risk largely is determined by complexity, right? So what happens with modern cloud-based orchestrated infrastructures is that yes, the single components are more secure, and I strongly believe that these modern infrastructures in the end are more secure than the traditional ones, but they also had a large degree of complexity. Just because our infrastructures now are distributed, are multi-service, are based on CI/CD pipelines, because today we want to release every day, not twice a year.
Right.
And this adds a bunch of moving parts. This adds complexity, and this adds much more places where the human factor can cause issues from the point of view of, leaking credentials, of forgetting an S3 bucket open, of misconfiguring access to your Kubernetes cluster, this kind of stuff. So we're getting more and more powerful in the way we deliver applications, but we're also getting more complex, and that means we need to be more careful about security, because there's more chances to do something wrong that could be very damaging for us.
Absolutely. So where do you see the space heading then?
First of all, again, my personal perspective and the perspective of Sysdig is the perspective of somebody that is really essentially working on a daily basis with companies that are at the bleeding edge of this. So what I see is definitely an explosion, an acceleration. There's an acceleration in general toward everything that is cloud, which was driven in the last couple of years by macro dynamics like the pandemic and so on, where more and more essentially, software in any industry, any vertical is your primary element of competition, and more being essentially up to date and modern in the way you deliver software, and therefore you interact with your user and your customers is more and more important. This has brought to essentially an explosion, not only in essentially transition to moving to the cloud, because the cloud gives you more elasticity to be able to deal with these new challenges in the global market. But it also gives you, the ability to adopt an infrastructure that is well architected at the fundamental level by the cloud providers. Now, this is more and more driven by modern technologies like Kubernetes is really becoming I call it the operating system of the cloud, right? Yeah. Because the same way Linux was scheduling processing on a single machine, Kubernetes schedules services on a distributed infrastructure. Right. So more and more adoption of modern technologies, and talking about security because we are at RSA, more and more awareness of having to approach from the security point of view in the correct way the problem of modern security, and this is evolving on a daily basis. Essentially, service meshes, agentless, everything that has to do with runtime security and real-time security in cloud. These are all areas that are essentially we are discovering and evolving now as we're speaking. Are those the conversations that you're having with your customers? What seems to be kind of their biggest pain points when it comes to security? And very much so. In a general way, when transitioned to the cloud, in many cases, is just okay. First of all, we need to start from the basis. Yeah. We need to get visibility on what is running, which teams, which people, which resources, and so on, which services we're using from the cloud providers. Many organizations are still struggling at this level, especially with something like cloud that very often grows bottom up, in an organization. It's like, okay, it's great that teams are embracing this, that we are more agile, that we can deliver our software faster, but we don't even know, do we have something running in Europe, in AWS, or I don't know, in South America, in Azure, this kind of stuff. And then, of course, so gaining visibility is currently step number one and priority number one. And then it's like, okay, there's two things that at that point I see people want to do. One is make sure that the software delivery pipeline is secured, and that means the so-called shift left security, right? So go more and more toward the code. For example, a new trend that I'm seeing that is very, very top of mind for CISOs right now is infrastructure as code security, right? Because every infrastructure in the cloud is declared as a piece of software in a declarative way. It's on GitHub, it's JSON, it's YAML, it's Python, and so on. So there's really a chance to go and treat essentially your infrastructure and the way your infrastructure is declared as a piece of code that can be secured with shift left paradigms. You can help customers, for example, we have a product that is able to scan infrastructures. First of all, find them, on GitHub or GitLab and so on, scan them and open pull requests automatically to increase compliance or remove risk and this kind of stuff. The other side is that is symmetric is, okay, now that my stuff, I protect it while I build it essentially. What happens when it runs? Right. And, everybody talks about shiftless security. Not many people talk about shift right security. But that's equally important, because in complex environments, when something changes, when somebody's able to get your credentials and get in your infrastructure, when data is exfiltrated, you really need to know right away, so as fast as possible, and take action. And we were talking before about the chain and not having weak links. More and more, these two things are treated together, because what you learn at runtime can inform you on how you can improve things in your build pipeline, and vice versa. Maybe the vulnerabilities that you find in the pipeline allow you to fix things in a more responsive way at runtime. And this is a cycle.
That makes total sense. Total sense. And, you know, I think we've seen a greater number of companies move to cloud native infrastructure and cloud native applications. And I think as they move forward, they understand that there are a lot of complexities involved in securing these environments and securing environments that are both, you know, hybrid, multi-cloud, you know, cloud native. I mean, there's a lot there, and it can be very difficult to kind of wrap your brain around. So I really think simplicity is going to be the key moving forward. And so any way that we can help the developers do their job better, and security being a part of that process, I think is going to be very, very well received. So, Loris, I want to thank you for coming and having this conversation with me. It's great stuff. I mean, you guys are doing really awesome stuff in the cloud native space. So
thank you for having me.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. So, all right, everybody, we have got 2 panel discussions coming up. First of all, we've got CISO talks coming up, I believe, at 2:30 Eastern. And then after that, we have a Techstrong Women panel discussion coming up at 3:30 p.m. Pacific. And so we will, I think I said 2:30 Eastern. I meant 2:30 Pacific, and then 3:30 Pacific. So please do stay tuned for both of them. And we're going to take a quick break. And then like I said, we'll be back at 2:30 with CISO Talk.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw again. We're here with Ram Venkatesh, who's CTO for Cloudera. We're talking about the launch of a new offering they have, which is an all-in-one data lakehouse, which I guess you can access in the cloud or wherever you need it to be. And we're going to be talking about, well, what exactly is a data lake these days, and what goes into that, and how much heavy lifting do I need to do to manage that whole space? So Ram, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show. Happy to be here.
So explain, if you would, what exactly do we mean by an all-in-one data lakehouse? Is that a turnkey platform, or is everything becoming automated? What's going on?
Sure, happy to. So the lakehouse is really, it's a very simple idea, I think, at its heart is being able to analyze all of your data efficiently. That's what the lakehouse is all about. So it brings together, a data lake. Think of this as infinite storage, right? So you can land all different kinds of data, streaming data, real-time data, batch data, tabular data, right? Flat files, video, music, what have you. So the lake gives you a place to land all of your data. The lake house part of it lets you actually, by enabling SQL-based queries over the lake, now you've made all of the data in the lake, both the structured, the semi-structured, and the unstructured data that's in the lake, accessible to all the analysts the business analysts that you have in your company. Right? So that's what the framing for a lake house is, essentially, structured analytics at scale across all of your data. And the all-in-one piece of this is with CDP-1, what we are doing is we are making the Lakehouse now be available in a new deployment form factor. To your question about how much work it's going to be for my customers, right? So CDP, the Cloudera Data Platform, we've traditionally had two form factors. One we call customer managed. This is the CDP private cloud offering where the customer runs the whole thing themselves. Then there's CDP public cloud, which was a platform as a service offering. So CDP1 is the software as a service version of the same thing. So it's the same platform and now available in 3 different deployment choices based on what our customers' particular requirements or needs might be.
We've seen people build data warehouses before, and then we saw the emergence of the data lake. And then that led to issues around what became known as the data swamp, and a lot of people couldn't figure out how to implement it or maintain it. So what is changing here to make the whole thing more accessible to people and maybe help guarantee that they're going to be successful the first time out?
It's a good question. Look, I think that the conflict between the warehouse and the lake has really been one about, the warehouse was all about like an end-to-end vertical stack that you could use SQL to analyze all of the data as long as it was in the warehouse. And the lake was this horizontal thing. You could land any kind of data, which meant if you were not being very rigorous about it, it could quickly degenerate into a place that just had a lot of data that was not easily accessible. Right? So what's changed is the piece that links these two together is what we call the open table format. Think of this as a way to overlay a tabular skin using metadata on top of the data that's already in the lake. What this new architectural piece in the stack then lets us do is you can come in through the warehouse and you think you're dealing with tables and rows and columns and you can do your SQL efficiently. You can land the data into the lake as if you were just writing it to this infinite store. So in a way, for a lot of our customers, the Lakehouse lets them have their cake and eat it too. Right? So they can land semi-structured data, and then they can analyze it through a SQL-based front end. And so the Lakehouse, this is a pattern. This is not new, right? We discovered this pattern probably 7-8 years ago because it's much easier to analyze data using SQL than almost any other way of playing with large amounts of data, especially in interactive fashion. And so this pattern and this paradigm, what's new about it now is there's a new open source protocol and standard that makes this even more easier and even more interoperable than in the past. This is Apache Iceberg. So injecting Iceberg into this Lakehouse conversation is the piece that has made the Lakehouse truly open.
It's great that we can launch queries against a larger volume and diverse set of data. My question to you, though, is, are we making it easier for developers to access data as they build their applications? Because that's always been a hurdle. It's we build the applications faster, and then we wait for the data to put into those applications. So are we bridging that gap?
Yeah. So, and increasingly for our customers, it's all about velocity, right? It's like how quickly can we stand up a use case on top of the data that we already have? How quickly can we get to like time to value, if you will? That's the core metric that our customers really want to optimize on. So what we've realized is that there are 3 contributors to where time gets spent on a project that's worth optimizing. Right? The first one is actually operational, standing up the platform, making sure that it's secure, connecting up to data sources, and landing the data inside the platform. That's the first piece of it. The second piece of it is how do you make it be, self-service for practitioners to massage the data to fit the analytics or the use case that they are looking for. And then the third piece is how do you actually produce business consumable dashboards and reports and so on, again, in an interactive self-service way. So with CDP1, we are actually attacking all 3 parts of this problem. It's SaaS, so by definition, it's zero ops, right? So the amount of operational care and feeding that you have to do is significantly low. In CDP1, we are also introducing new, what we call low-code connectors to bring data in from different sources without writing a lot of code. So for example, if your data is in your relational backend or increasingly even in a SaaS application like maybe Salesforce, So you want to bring Salesforce data into a particular use case. You can do that just by configuring the Salesforce connector and selecting what subset of the data you want to work with, but without writing a lot of code to accomplish that. And then the third piece is around self-service analytical exploration, which we can do with that visualization framework. Right? That lets customers, the business analysts themselves, not the development staff that they have, but the analysts themselves can assemble reports. They can make these things look exactly the way they want them to, and then they can publish them out. So it lets them automate out the entire workflow. And by addressing this holistically, this is how we plan to make it more easy, more efficient for customers to deploy their use cases much faster end to end. As an example, CWT, we're an international travel firm. They've been working with CDP1 when it was in private preview for a while. And they had to roll out a fairly complex travel use case that touched sensitive customer data. Right? You can see that they work in multiple geos and there's different regulatory concerns when you go do that. They were able to deploy this analytical model based on top of CDP in a matter of days to a small number of weeks to get the thing into production. And that represents like significant ease of use over what they would have had to previously. Previously, it could take somebody 3 to 6 months to operationalize a use case like that. And now they can do this in a small number of weeks. So I think that's how the platform has gotten easier for customers to work with.
We hear a lot about digital transformation these days. Data is the new oil. And yet we hear a lot of people are having trouble with this whole paradigm and this whole shift. So did we maybe underestimate the challenges associated with trying to manage data at this level of scale and velocity?
Yeah, I think that there's two facets to the problem. We naturally gravitate towards the technical part of it. What features can I enable in my product or service to make it be easier for our customers to get value, and that train that'll keep chugging along. But I think there's an acknowledgement now in the industry that there's another piece to this, which is cultural, right? Which is how to be a data-driven enterprise. Right? Our customers, they're looking for ways to build trustworthy data sets. Right? So you have a data set that you know that this is accurate, that's good fidelity, I can trust it. They want to build data sets that are shareable, so that if one business unit produces a data set, the second one doesn't have to go through pipelines and all this other magic for them to get access to the data. They need to be able to discover it and use it. Right? And the third piece is around collaboration and sharing. All of these things are cultural. We can enable a set of things in various products and services, but I think that data as a product mindset, I think that has taken a lot more time to evolve than we thought. And I still think we are at the beginning of that journey. That's going to take us another 6 to 8 years, I think, for the industry to get really mature and thinking about, how do you build data as a product? How do you move data around so conveniently so that you can actually deploy lots and lots of use cases? When you talk to our customers, they don't want to deploy like 3 use cases or 5 use cases or 10 use cases. They want every part of their business has to be data driven. So we're talking hundreds, we're talking thousands of use cases. That's where I think the scale of this product mindset thinking is still, I think, in the early part of the journey. There's recognition, and now we need to see that actually play out.
It almost sounds like, maybe I'm dating myself a little bit here, but back in the day we had XML, and one of the cool things about it was self-describing. Are we moving down that path now where the data actually does describe what it's about, and maybe where it conflicts with other data, and then we can automatically resolve all that, throw some algorithms at it, and maybe we're not going to be spending all our time manually massaging data?
Yeah, that's so self-describing data and comprehensive, robust metadata, that's a big part of it for sure. But I think you probably don't need to go quite that far back in the past. I think the piece that is starting to get really exciting now is, people are applying, I want to call like conventional software architecture, microservices like thinking to data. This is the whole data mesh revolution that you're starting to see in the industry. Right? I think this is where, people need ways to think of data problems as small team problems. Things that 3 or 4 people can go and put together and stand up in a matter of weeks and they can realize value. And then somebody else can go do another one of these. Someone can discover the things, the artifacts produced by the first two teams and build out a third one. But I think it's that sort of viral composition of data apps and use cases, which will be built on what you talked about, on metadata and on being able to describe the relationships between data. But it's really more systematic thinking applied to how you actually build a data application. I think that's where some of the 10x improvements in productivity are going to come from.
Do you think then that we will bridge the divide between the business and IT? And I know we've come a long way, but frankly, there's a lot of business users that don't trust the data and they don't want to make decisions based on it because the data is conflicting or it just doesn't jive with their hands-on experience. So are we getting to the point where we can kind of have that kumbaya moment because we do have a set of data that's reliable?
I think that, to me, the way I look at this problem is I feel like IT is an enabler. IT can make sure that your infrastructure is reliable, secure. You're being pragmatic about cost. There's a whole bunch of things that IT can do to make sure that things function properly. And all of those are still very valid and relevant when it comes to data use cases. The piece that you talked about, trusting the data, I think that is actually, if you start to think about the data as a product, then every product has a product owner, right? And that product owner need not necessarily be part of IT. Right? For example, if you have a marketing product owner, they know the marketing data sets in their company. They know which campaigns are being run at what time. They know which data sets are current, which ones are out of date, which ones are going to get replaced 3 months from now, right? So I think that's where I see the way teams collaborate to produce data. I think this data product owner is going to be increasingly a very important person to orchestrate how the use case gets rolled out. And this is very similar to how apps get rolled out today. An application, a product owner or a product manager is so critical in the app space for you to get an app that's well put together and can be released in a very expedient way. The same kind of thinking, I think, will get applied to data. And then IT will have a role to play in making sure that you have consistency, you have security, you have compliance, you have risk and cost, all of these things thought about. But the actual use case, the business needs to be able to build out that use case with as little friction as possible end to end.
We have seen the emergence of DataOps as a discipline, and a lot of the principles that are borrowed there are from DevOps. So will we see DevOps and DataOps kind of converge as we go along here?
I think increasingly, both of these, they have this underlying theme of being policy-based, right? Like being declarative, being able to specify exactly what you want, and then let the systems, whether it be SaaS, whether it be PaaS, whether it's customer managed, you have processes in place to automate the things that you want to automate to achieve that desired end state that you're looking for. So I think in that sense, that DevOps culture, I think increasingly is so critical to be part of the data landscape. The other piece there is around making sure that you have really robust ways of testing and releasing the software to make sure that like CI/CD like methodologies can get applied properly when it comes to data applications. So I think this is where definitely our customers want to go with the platforms. Like this is consistent with their view of lots of data apps, faster, cheaper, better. And that's, I think, DevOps is the critical piece to solve as part of that journey.
What is it you wish organizations knew going in about building a data lake to last, to scale for, multiple business units that you see them kind of not appreciating, or the mistake that they make over and over again that just makes you shake your head and go, if they'd only know to do what?
If there's one thing, right, I think that comes to mind for me, it is starting off with a very concrete use case and getting that use case stood up in production all the way, making money for you. That's the best way to actually deploy a platform, right? So you're just starting from the customer. The use case has to be solid. It's got to be something that is like impactful to the business. It's got to have a timeline that's in weeks, not in months or years. And it has an outcome. It's very binary. You got there. What did you learn along the way? So I find that when companies embark on this journey to be data driven, the ones that are really successful are the ones who have that bowling pin use case knocked down. And then they got the next one and the next one and the next one. And there's a lot of momentum on how they're delivering. It's when companies look at platform first that I think that they get in trouble, where they might be like, oh, first let's all get all the data in the company in one place. Then let's build a data model across the company for what does a customer mean to us? I mean, these are like deep and relevant questions, but your path to ROI is a lot longer than the first one that I described to you. So usually when we work with customers who want to be data driven, we encourage them really to start from the use case in rather than from the platform out, if that makes sense.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. Repeat after me. Do not attempt to boil the data ocean. Hey, Ram, thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. Cody J. Brown here with some more programs that are happening next week here at Techstrong Learning. So starting on Monday, August 22nd at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard, join a panel led by our very own Mike Vizard on API security. We will explore the rapidly evolving application and API landscape and offer concrete ways organizations can protect against new threats. On Tuesday, August 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern on Devops.com, join us for Transforming the Database, Critical Innovations for Performance at Scale. ScyllaDB engineers will provide an inside look at innovations dev teams are using to improve performance and prioritize workloads. And finally, on Wednesday, August 24th at 11 a.m. Eastern, Devops.com and Metallic present Modern Data Protection with Metallic Data Management as a Service, Hybrid, Kubernetes, and beyond. This program will unpack the critical need for dedicated data protection and how Metallic's data management as a service safeguards your data from deletion, corruption, and ransomware attacks. So that's all I've got for you right now, so please come join us over at Techstrong Learning, where we have plenty of upcoming and on-demand programs ready and waiting for you.
Coding is changing the world, making a difference in the world.
We take anyone, any adult, and help them become the best version of themselves and become a software engineer.
At Techstrong Group, we've undertaken to meet this challenge with our Engineering the Change Scholarship.
My career is completely changed to now being sought after by some of the biggest tech companies in the world.
Full $10,000 scholarship to one winner to attend the intense software development course at Boca Code.
I was just ready to be a software engineer.
So Donald is another story.
Right now it's kind of like, I don't know.
Honestly, it's starting to scare me a little bit.
Roller coaster of understanding something one moment and then feeling lost the next.
If you change the capitalization of a file name, you are going to your whole project.
At the end of it, you're going to be a really good family.
We call Stephanie like the silent ninja. As much as he's struggling, Donald really, really wants this.
My house burned down twice.
The biggest thing I'm struggling with definitely is time.
It's pretty cool that I've been able to expand my mind to be able to accept different ways of doing something.
My only option is to succeed.
Boca Code, we do it!
Highs, definitely getting started. Lows would be Darius jokes.
We told all of them that this is the hardest thing they would have to go through. All of our graduates are absolute stars.
Boca Code!
Who will graduate and become a software engineer?
This is Digital Anarchist.
I'm joined by Mike Ferranti, is that
Ferranti,
correct?
That's right.
Boy, I got that right. Good to be meeting with you, Mike.
Yeah,
Mike
likewise.
is CMO with Teleport. Welcome to the beginning of KubeCon, Cloud Native Con. Wow, I'm impressed. It's a good turnout here. I haven't been to a show like this in a while.
It feels normal.
It does. It does. Other than, I have to take your map and put it on all the time.
Temperature check and all those things. I think those are going to be with us for a while, but it's great
too.
After a couple years off at trade shows, actually talking to people and just getting back into it.
It's funny to bump into so many people in one place again. What was normal used to be anyway.
Now there's the game of I think I recognize them, but I'm not quite sure.
I never paid that much attention to your eyes before. Now I know who you are, right? So tell us about the show for you, for Teleport. Now, obviously, you're in the access management into the cloud. What's special about KubeCon and why you're here and what you're talking to customers about?
Yeah. So I guess to maybe set the context. So Teleport is, we describe Teleport as the easiest and most secure way to access infrastructure. And there are kind of two important parts of that sentence. There's the secure and there's the easy. A typical DevOps engineer walking around this show on a daily basis has to access dozens of different systems. And each of those systems has its own way of managing secure access. If it's a Linux server, we're talking about SSH. If it's Kubernetes, then Kubernetes has its own way of doing role-based access control. Each database protocol has its own way of doing auth in and auth z. Internal applications, Windows servers. And so kind of as an individual DevOps engineer or an SRE or a systems architect, I'm kind of constantly swapping credentials, logging into vaults, retrieving credentials to access this server. I might be a part of the team that has to do all of the key rotation to make that work for all the different engineers on the team. And then even if you've done all that, the audit layer for who is accessing what and when and what they're doing is incomplete. And so what Teleport does is we provide a very easy to use experience to implement role-based access control for all of your infrastructure resources with complete audit built in. And so it's easy for systems architects to implement, and then for individual DevOps engineers and other engineers to use and consume on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think all of us, developers too, kind of look for the easy button, especially when it comes to security, but we want it to be secure. So, accessing all those resources and managing the roles and permissions, now you've got machine identity in the mix too, because we're, microservices and Kubernetes and different architectures. We're all talking services to each other, whether it's ours or third party.
Exactly.
Talk about what Teleport does there.
Yeah, so we looked at the numbers, and they're something like 22 million software engineers worldwide, but there are literally billions of, we could call machines out there, pieces of software that themselves are programmatically accessing other pieces of software. And so when you think about solving the access problem and making secure access a reality, you have to focus on what machines are doing as well as what people are doing. And the same solution that works for a human, isn't going to work for a machine because, I can touch ID into my laptop with Teleport and get immediate access to all of my infrastructure resources, but my Jenkins bot or my Ansible bot can't do the same thing. So one of the things that we recently announced is a product called Machine ID. It enables organizations to consolidate their access policies that they're already using Teleport to manage with their policies specifically for machines. And it makes it really easy to take advantage of identity-based access, but extended to a new class of users.
Yeah, it seems that one of the things about machines is, as much as we move around and change roles, change jobs, whatever it might be, machines are doing that constantly, driven automation, driven through software.
Highly dynamic. That's
got to add a lot of complexity to, trying to do it by person, by hand, more or less, managing it through a Teleport or other kind of solution. That's got to be a big part of the problem you're solving.
Yeah, one of the things that we say is that kind of Teleport solves access at scale. pretty much anything in life, when you just try to do it, one or two times, or for one or two things, most things in life are relatively simple. It's like, having a dinner party for friends versus, doing catering for a 10,000 person event. Very different level of scale. And it's the same thing for access. It's easy-ish for a team of small engineers to just, manage SSH keys, have a couple of different roles that they apply to, kind of shared admin credentials. It's a small group, you trust each other, but once you scale to dozens or hundreds or thousands of engineers, or those same numbers for machines, solving access in a consistent way becomes very challenging. And with machine identity in particular, because of the numbers that we're talking about, spinning up and spinning down huge clusters, you really need to be able to leverage automation to create credentials, give those credentials to the system that ultimately is going to need to have its access controlled, rotate those credentials. And so one of the innovations that we brought with Machine ID is, just like Let's Encrypt made it very easy to get SSL certificates for websites, and now you have hundreds of millions of websites that are more secure because of the Let's Encrypt project. We're doing the same thing for machine identities, and basically running a certificate authority for you, so that you can kind of create, deploy, and rotate machine identities, or certificates for machine identities.
You're not relying on a third party to go get your machine certs. Plus, you'd also be able to rotate certificates much more shorter time to live. Exactly.
So by default, all of our certificates are always short-lived. One of the things that we found in doing research for this product is that sometimes people had moved to certificates because they understand kind of the more metadata about a user can be embedded in a certificate than you can in say a key, right? A key, if you have it, you're allowed access. With a certificate, I can actually understand who you are. But because certificate rotation is such a challenge, people were creating these long-lived certificates, which defeats the purpose, because then it becomes just another secret that if it's stolen, hacked, can enable someone to get into your infrastructure. Solving that problem requires that you kind of master rotation. And once you've done that, then you can have short TTLs, kind of, and all the security benefits that go along with it. But it comes at a kind of a complexity cost, and that's one of the specific things that Teleport does, is we reduce that complexity cost down to zero for you, so you can take advantage of certificates the way that they were intended to be used.
You don't have to implement those 180-day password expiration policies like we do with people.
Exactly.
I'm really curious. So a solution like Teleport, is it usually the developers that are bringing it in to kind of help solve the complexity and the volume problem, if you will? Is it often imposed for compliance reasons or by security teams, or a little bit of a mix of both?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mix of both. I would say that we, the people that are most passionate about Teleport today are the security-minded engineers. They're the practitioners. They're the ones that are building these systems, but they also understand that those systems need to be secure. So it's a very common use case would be, you walk around here, you're going to see dozens of Teleport customers, and they are the types of companies that are building a next generation database, and they're selling that solution to perhaps a VP of engineering. And that database provider has their own customers, and those customers are going to say, okay, like, I love your database, and I want to take advantage of running it in your cloud as a managed service, because then I don't have to do it myself. But how secure is it? Are your employees able to access my data? How do you know if they have? What kind of audit do you have in place? And what Teleport does is we enable our customers to solve those security and compliance concerns that their end customers have, kind of by passing through to Teleport. So it's kind of a win-win situation.
Plus, it's all that data is collected. Evidence is there.
Exactly.
Great. Well, where can folks find out more? And do you have free demos, open source? What kinds of ways can they engage with you?
Yeah. So Teleport's completely open source. So always love for people to just go to goteleport.com. You click on the button at the top. It's going to bring you to a page where you can access our open source download. If you want to try Teleport in the cloud as a managed service from Teleport. There's a way to do a free trial for that as well. Plenty of ways to contact us if you just want to get a demo, learn a little bit more about how it works in your environment. All of those options are available.
Great. Sounds like the security champions on those DevOps teams would be great candidates to go check it out. Well, anybody would, but they're the folks that, the security-minded engineers you're talking about. Good. Well, I hope you had a good show, and excited to see more of those Teleport customers around today, and I hope you come back. I know you've been on before on Techstrong TV.
Always happy.
Always good to have you folks here. Mike?
Great.
Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Peter Brass and PD Prasad from Lightbeam.ai, and we're talking about a data trustee maturity model that these guys have open sourced. So let's just get started with one of you maybe explaining exactly what that is.
Yeah, hey Mike, pleasure to be here. So one of the problems that we have been hearing from customers is a lot of privacy regulations these days that are coming up, which is CCPA, GDPR has been out there for a long time, obviously. They're all identity centric, and they're all about, it's the individual essentially. On the other hand, all the tools and the products and solutions that have been there in the market for the last 10 years, they're all about, unfortunately, just about attributes, meaning they just care about if there is a sensitive information somewhere, but they don't really link that back into the identity, the individual. And so what the data trustee maturity model helps customers understand is, well, you probably care about the what, which is what sensitive information is present here, there, and everywhere. Do you really understand whose information it is that's out there? And that's important because, every now and then we keep hearing about one or the other data exposure, and companies are, after that exposure, figuring out whose data is it that we actually exposed so that we can actually take care of such individuals. The data trustee maturity model is a step in that direction, essentially, for the community and industry.
All right. Peter, what's the challenge? I mean, to PD's point, we are seeing a lot more of these regulations, but fundamentally, what is the challenge when it comes to managing privacy that you're out seeing and the data and the things that people are trying to do? I mean, we've been at this for 4 or 5 decades now. So the question is, what exactly is the challenge and the problem that we're not figuring out?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So, the challenge is, I think a lot of security-minded folks are still looking at how to secure data by setting up, larger fences, bigger gates, if you will, figuring if nobody can get inside, nobody can see my data. So the problem of controlling the sprawl of that data is insurmountable. So we'll just build bigger fences. And of course, what we're seeing in the industry is those fences aren't working because the breaches are still occurring, even at very large, very well-funded organizations. So what we're trying to address here at Lightbeam is really helping people uncover where that sensitive data is, and taking it a step beyond that through, the intelligence that we offer with artificial intelligence is not just doing pattern matching for it, where it's going to throw up a million false positives to the point that we as humans will just ignore all of those false positives. We're really bringing a different level of intelligence towards identifying that sensitive data And to Petey's point, helping them know who it belongs to. So it's much more actionable from a compliance standpoint and a regulatory standpoint.
Petey, do you think that, to Peter's point, that we overinvested in the network security and didn't secure the data enough? Or is it merely just a matter of we need to do both, and frankly, it's just going to cost more, and we got to secure the data and the network, and there's no getting around it?
It's an interesting dichotomy, and it's a wonderful framing of that question, really. To be honest, if you look at the last 20 years, there isn't a way where companies could actually look inside the data. You couldn't. You would just use regular expressions and pattern matching, and that's pretty much it. And that's not sufficient. You could program your system to say, if you have a 9-digit number, flag that as an SSN. And guess what? It will work for a few days. After that, you will just get bombarded with thousands and thousands of false positives. So what has happened in the last 2 years in the industry is good ML models have actually come out, and thanks to some of the organizations that have actually open sourced those models, which is now enabling companies like Lightbeam, ourselves, to actually take advantage of those ML models and help customers look in the data. So really, data security, companies have been doing network security because that is what it was possible, essentially. Data security was not possible unless you count pattern matching as data security, which is, okay, first step, I suppose. Now it is possible. And what organizations are realizing, to Peter's point, is just building big walls, firewalls and so on, it's not sufficient. Obviously, case in point, every day there is one or the other breach happening. You really need to understand what data it is that you have, where is that data, and most importantly, whose data is it that you're carrying inside your walls, and what data is actually leaking out or getting shared outside of your walls as well.
Peter, what's the level of maturity of the AI models themselves these days? Because initially there was a lot of, AI is going to save us from ourselves. Then there was a lot of skepticism, and, we kind of go back and forth across these different poles, and it's kind of a whiplash effect in some regards. But, what should people expect, and what's real and what's not?
It's a great question. So, myself, I tend to view what we're doing with AI here at Lightbeam as magic, candidly. And speaking with the people who are actually writing the code, leveraging it, they sort of laugh and like, yeah, we think it's magic too. The old rub, any sufficiently advanced technology is going to feel like magic at any point in time, right? And so that's sort of what we're doing, and it's really the magic of being able to take the context of what that data is in and being able to identify it as something that you should care about. And, we're leveraging not just AI and ML, but also natural language processing. So an image of a driver's license, no smart robot is going to look at an image and know what's going on, but being able to use natural language processing to look at the text within that and identify it as an identity-based document, and then be able to even tell which fields in there matter. And then, the really unique thing that we do at Lightbeam is take it that step further. If we find that, we have automation available to our customers to be able to automatically redact that. So again, it's not just relying on alerting humans. Humans are really bad at repetitive tasks. We don't like it. It's boring. So we stop doing it at some point, or we do it inaccurately. By offloading that to the computer so that when we find that sensitive data, if the customer so chooses, we can automatically redact it in addition to notifying them. That's just a level of simplicity and automation that hasn't existed historically.
Petey, I can't help but wonder if the tail is wagging the dog here in this regard. I think a lot of the legislatures around the world are passing laws about data privacy with some assumptions of capabilities that maybe don't exist. And that's going to force the issue then, where people are going to have to go look for more automation and AI to go solve the problem. Is that a fair assessment of the situation?
It's right on point, actually. It's right on point. In fact, I was just reading an article about how in Europe over there, they tend to be a little ahead of the curve when it comes to caring about consumer privacy and data privacy. Regulations are being written, and some people are wondering, well, what are the technologies, what are the tools that are available to help companies to comply? As you noted, Well, there are technologies and tools that are becoming available rapidly, I would say. In the last 2 years, the landscape has changed dramatically in terms of going from a pattern matching, and I'm just going to quickly repeat that, pattern matching to, as Peter was noting, a more AI-based model where you're really, my favorite example is showing someone a 9-digit number and saying, will an existing tool flag that as an SSN? And the answer is, well, it might very well be someone's SSN, and probably it will. You can't just look at the content. You have to look at the context. Is that number as part of a text message, a WhatsApp message, an email, a database where it's present in a field? You have to look at the context, and that's where AI helps. And, regulations are coming. They're already there. The old excuse of, well, I'm doing the best I can works until you actually get hit by a ransomware attack. And you come to know, you wake up one fine morning and say, oh, wow, I leaked 5 million customer accounts data, which was present in some S3 bucket I had no clue about. And well, now my reputation is, down the drain, unfortunately. So, to your point, the regulations are there. They're a little bit ahead of the time, which is great. That's where they need to be. And they need to push the industry, including ourselves, to actually help customers comply with those regulations.
Peter, do organizations need to change the way they think about data? It used to be, I would collect data and I would give people these really long forms to fill out, and they'd check the box, and somewhere in that form it said, you'd surrendered your rights to your data. I don't think most people view it that way these days. I think maybe they perceive it that they're lending data to these organizations in some regard or form. So is the whole approach to the way that we need to think about being custodians of data changing?
Yes, absolutely. As we've been talking about some of the legislation that exists today and some of the additional legislation that's coming, right to be forgotten is something that is going to have consequences for companies if they aren't able to actually perform that request. And so as you look at it, and again, this problem we're trying to solve around identity-centric view of the world, if a customer comes to a company and says, been great doing business with you, but I'm not going to anymore, and you need to delete all of the data that you have on me. What possible way could a company do that? A sufficiently large company that has multiple places to share and exchange and store data, how can they solve that if they don't know where that customer's data is and that it belongs to that customer? And that's the real challenge that we're seeing our customers struggle with, is that they do not have a way of doing that today. It's exhaustively manual. And again, as I've sort of already articulated, with all of the efficacy of manual efforts by humans.
PD, in my experience, at least, very few organizations I know would get a good housekeeping seal of approval for the way they manage data. So we have a lot of conflicting data. So how does we approach that whole thing where, people's names are spelled differently, companies' names are spelled differently, actual values attached to contracts are different in different things. No one seems to know what the real state of the truth is. So can we get there faster with AI? What do you think?
We are getting there. I wouldn't say we are 100% there, but we are getting there rapidly. To just give you an example, AI, the difference between, sometimes a lot of companies and people and technology people that I talk to, a number of them are pitching their solution as AI. And it's great. It's good to pitch your solution as AI. Great. The difference in a regular software program, between a regular software program and an AI model, is that you can train the AI model. You couldn't, I used to write code 20 years back for, controllers that control our cars, the cars that we drive on streets today. It's one and done. You write the code, you test it, you ship it. That's pretty much it. That code is not going to learn on its own, no matter what the situation and conditions are. AI, on the other hand, actually has this active learning capability. So what we are seeing in customers' environment is obviously, we train, and we, unlike many AI organizations, by the way, who are truly doing AI, they train the model to the best of their abilities, to keeping in mind biases and checking those biases and so on and so forth. But when you actually deploy that model in a customer environment, guess what? Every customer is slightly unique. They have slightly different types of data. They've got different kinds of challenges you were alluding to, which is sometimes names are different, spelled incorrectly, and so on and so forth. The AI model learns over a period of time. And that's what makes it so powerful, is that day one, you might only get 94% accuracy. Well, day 30, you might get 99%, and day 365, you will be at 100% accuracy with automation in place. So that's what's really exciting, at least to us in this field.
Peter, who's in charge of this mess these days? It seems like the security people should be in charge, but we see chief data officers. Sometimes the IT people will point back at the business people, because the IT people will say, hey, we just store the data. We don't know what the value of the data is from one thing to the next. So who is going to take the leadership role in all of this?
It's a fantastic issue that we're seeing a lot of our customers struggle with exactly that problem. There can be a bit of a hot potato approach to this. The more modern organizations have chief privacy officers and teams that are dedicated to ensuring that they're meeting the needs of really truly safeguarding customer and privately identifiable data, and they're really doing that. Ultimately, the responsibility for setting it up and providing access to the systems is going to be traditional IT, the security department within IT. They're the ones who have those systems and are responsible for the security. So I think what we're seeing is an increasing need for companies to collaborate and decide what they're going to do. The policies as far as how they're going to handle private sensitive data is going to be up to data governance, privacy officers, those teams. But when it comes time to actually executing on those policies and doing the work, that's going to definitely require the help of IT to again start looking at a different lens for the problem of security than just setting up more difficult barriers.
PD, the maturity model is clearly a step in the right direction, but what's your best advice to folks about how to get started with all this? What should they be thinking about? What is it you wish most customers knew going in versus figuring out 6 months later?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Mike. If you as a customer, any organization, just start with a simple question. Checkbox privacy. If that's all you do, which is ask consumers and customers like ourselves to fill in and check a lot of boxes, it is a very CYA approach. It won't unfortunately help you when your data gets exposed in that exposed S3 bucket or Google Drive or Slack or Zendesk or so on, whatever it is. Essentially, you have to start with what is the best for your customer, because guess what? And you just alluded to this, which is there's a concept of data trusteeship that is evolving. And that's what the data trustee maturity model helps companies understand. Just ask yourself two simple questions. If I don't have the checkboxes, but I take care of customers' data properly, I secure them, I know where it is, I know it's not getting exposed. That is situation one. Situation two, you have all the checkboxes in the world, but you keep leaking customers' data. Which organization is a consumer going to trust more and do more business with? That's very, 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 very simple. If you ask me, I would do business with customers who don't leak my data, who understand where my data is, who secure it properly. And of course, if they give me all the privacy checkboxes, it's great. It's great to get a privacy compliance notice once a year from a big organization. It's good. As long as you don't leak my data, I'm happy with you.
All right. Hey, Peter, do you think the courts are figuring all this out? Because many times, people would go to a lawsuit and the judge would say, well, where's this data? Who accessed all this? And the IT people would sit there and say, we have no idea and we have no way of finding out. So do you think the courts are going to turn around now and say, we understand that there's this AI thing and maybe you can figure this out?
I don't know that I'll be overly optimistic they'll figure it out quickly, but one would hope that they will. Again, part of the reason why I'm here at Lightbeam is this is a subject that I care quite a bit about. The absolute expansive amount of data that all companies are capturing on us in every aspect of our life, and just knowing how easily exposed that is. It would be nice if there was a little bit of teeth to this, the increasing legislation that's out there. It would be nice if I, as a customer, could go to a company and say, hey, I am interested in doing business with you. I have been for a year now. Would you please show me what data that you've collected on me? is there a way that you can expose that to me? We're starting to see the world move in that direction somewhat. It's interesting to see the amount of resistance there is. There's two very, very large vendors out there. One makes hardware with operating system control. They're very concerned about privacy. And then there's a large social media organization that is, well, of course we need all of this private data because how else are we going to market to you? And somewhere in there, as with most things, somewhere in there is the truth and where we need to be. And without the controls in place for companies to be able to expose what data they actually have of mine beyond just to market to me is going to be a really hard thing. So yeah, hopefully we are evolving to a point where there's teeth to this legislation. At the end of the day, that's probably the only reason why most companies, they're driven by shareholder value, most of them. So at some point, there's got to be a little bit of teeth to make them care. And hopefully the judges will come along to support this. Absolutely.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. You might want to rethink your strategy before you are held in contempt of court someday. It may not happen tomorrow, but it's probably going to happen one day sooner than you think. Gentlemen, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mike. Pleasure.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Ryan Warble, who's the newly appointed CIO for Logic Monitor. They, of course, are a vendor in the DevOps space, among other places. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
There's a lot of challenges that CIOs are facing all across the board these days, including IT organizations, but it seems like there's this primordial soup of DevOps and application development comes together to drive digital business transformation. And what do you see as the role of IT? How is it changing or evolving these days? And for that matter, is IT closer to the business or further away than ever?
So from my perspective, IT is closer to the business than ever. I think what's happened over the last, decade or so is as technology has really grown and become much more sophisticated, it's also embedded itself in the business more than ever before. And in reality, when I think about the job of a CIO today, you almost have to have a mindset of a COO and understand the business better than anybody else in the company, because the technology we use and that we support runs every aspect of the business. So I need to understand how the business runs, how it works, both through the technology perspective, but also even from a business continuity perspective, should we have issues. So for me, it is 100% tied to the business. It is much more likely to have a seat at the table when talking about business strategy. And certainly in my roles, it is front and center on how we move forward, how we adjust the business, how we optimize the business, and really how we drive revenue.
What is the role of DevOps in this conversation? I feel like we've been talking about DevOps now in various forms for about a decade. It seems to be unevenly adopted. What are some of the challenges that organizations face? And are we reaching some sort of tipping point where everybody needs to do DevOps now just to keep the ball going?
So I think DevOps plays different roles in different types of companies and different industries. My background has been in the last decade or so in the industrial space. In the industrial space, it's an always-on environment. When systems are down, we lose money. So when I think about the warehouses that we were running in my previous role, or I think about the logistics terminals that I had when I was at APM Terminals, it's so important to keep things up and running and understand what's happening there. And the DevOps role really becomes critical because they're seeing across the space and really being able to look at how we function, how we operate, how the systems are staying up and going, how the infrastructure is performing. It's critical component that really keeps the business running. It's a behind the scenes model. I think that at the exec level, there's not always a true understanding of what DevOps does, but from a CIO perspective, the DevOps role becomes critical.
Do you think as more businesses become dependent upon software in some ways, the DevOps tail is going to wag the business dog from here on out because the business is dependent upon the pace at which the software comes out and is deployed?
So I don't think it'll go that far. I think that businesses are understanding that the technology piece is oftentimes leading the change, and not necessarily it's the CIO leading the change, but what the technology enables is leading the change. But I don't see DevOps as being a prohibitor to change or slowing it down. I do think that there's areas where we slow down a little bit, but it's more from a security perspective in a lot of the places that I'm looking and thinking through the vulnerabilities and how we plan and how we future-proof. But I see that less. I see DevOps as less of an inhibitor to that.
We talk a lot these days about observability, and we've been monitoring stuff forever and a day. So what is the difference in your mind between observability and what we've been doing with monitoring all these years, and how should people think about that?
Sure. So monitoring to me is looking at a set of defined criteria and set of defined metrics, whereas observability is much more into tracking, forecasting, showing anomalies, and giving you better visibility across the landscape for areas that you may not even be thinking about. If I think back over the past, again, we'll say decade, the monitoring components were defined and really observed by what we looked at was based on the intelligence of the person that was running a DevOps or an infrastructure organization. Whereas now in the observability, we're taking a much more holistic view and a much more open view of what's happening. So when I think about the journey of observability, it's enabling things that we're not thinking about as opposed to things that we can only define.
How automated do you think all that will get? When I talk to folks, one of the issues they seem to have is they don't really know what questions to ask in the first place. So they're looking to the system to tell them things versus them having to figure out what questions to ask and then query. I mean, it's great when they can, but at the end of the day, are we going to reach a point where, maybe I'll just come into the office in the morning and the system will tell me, here's the 3 things that are likely to get you fired today. You should go fix them.
Well, I would like to know those in advance. So yeah, that's a good idea. I don't know if we'll get that far, but if you think about the role of AI these days in some of these systems, I do think that we'll have a set of preventive maintenance that happens. It's almost relating back to, if I think about what we were doing again, if I go back to my terminals days, one of our biggest costs there was maintenance and downtime of equipment. If we had an unscheduled downtime of a crane, we lost business because we couldn't move cargo on and off of a ship. And putting preventive maintenance type systems in and looking at using all the sensors and the data and basically the information that the machine is passing on to us, that's allowing us to be proactive. And I think about observability in the same way. It's the ability to be more proactive, to have the leading indicators and really start to take care of issues before they occur. And that's, again, I think what the difference between monitoring and observability, it's that looking back at anomalies and seeing where they're going and there's trends. And if there's a blip every year around June because there is a rugby tournament that everyone's streaming and so you see max optimal performance happening, you see your traffic spiking, those are things that you can predict in advance. So there is certainly some capabilities I think that we'll get to where the infrastructure itself is telling you things to be thinking about.
As you kind of look around and you say, okay, we're going to have more insights into what's going on and more analytics tools to do that. Can we manage IT at a level of scale that previously we couldn't? Because it seems like we're always short of people. So are we reaching some point where, the same number of people can now manage infinitely larger numbers of workloads and systems?
I think there is a element of that. And I think about it, if I go back to the preventative maintenance side, where we get into trouble with when we're short resources is when we have fire drills and when everybody's reacting. And the ability to actually get out in front of those fire drills or the catastrophic events really helps you to manage your resource load. So if I know that there's work that's going to come, I can do it probably with less people and more efficiently because I have it planned out. I think it's, again, if I go back to my industrial days, the fire drills happened when the cranes went down unexpected and we had to figure out how to get cargo off the ship. If I'm planning for downtime through a preventative maintenance model, just as I would plan through an observability model, I actually can be much more efficient and much more structured in how I approach things. So in many ways, yeah, I do think that we can scale businesses larger, cover more ground in the infrastructure space, the application space, with the same amount of people we have today. I don't see the need for the amount of people, the amount of resources to increase dramatically.
We've been slowly but steadily marching towards the cloud for the last 10 years as well. But have we gotten to a point now where basically the IT platforms themselves are essentially services that I consume through some sort of GUI, API, CLI, whatever it is that I choose to use? But maybe the days when I'm building out massive amounts of IT infrastructure and managing that are also coming to a close. And now it's more about, hey, it's a service and I just call it when I need it.
So there is an aspect of that. And I don't think we'll ever get away from on-prem infrastructure completely. There will always be some aspect of it. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There are, and again, if I bring it back to the terminal side, terminals get very antsy that they don't have on-prem infrastructure, because their fear is there's always construction happening out in the port areas, and somebody cuts a fiber line, and then I can't have access, and people don't trust 5G yet to really be fully supportive of running an entire facility. So you still have to have some of those on-prem type models. So I think there's an aspect of that always being there. Government is another one. They'll be very slow to adopt massively all the cloud. We're seeing some move to that. But even if you're doing cloud moves because of the government regulations, if you took the Microsoft Office platforms, if you use the government model, it's extraordinarily expensive. So it's a bit of a deterrent. So I do think some of that on-prem continues. That said, I think we'll see a continued move of applications to the cloud and a migration to software as a service, platforms as a service. There's a strong need for it, but it'll continue to be a hybrid model, I believe, for a long time, which actually gives Logic Monitor a fantastic positioning, because we really cover both, and we can move with companies for both on-prem and moves to cloud, and really manage across the both models.
All right. Ryan, like a lot of good CIOs, you've got some gray hair there and you've earned it. So my question is, what do you know now that you wish you knew years ago? Now that you're a CIO, what would be your advice to somebody who wants to become a CIO? What do you know that you would have told your younger self?
I think I would say my lessons that I've learned through the years are always have a certain sense of paranoia as a CIO. You have to be thinking that something's going to go wrong as opposed to thinking it's all right. That's probably one. And I think of that through multiple aspects. Today, there are so many vulnerabilities out there and threats and things that are constantly happening that are outside of our control. And so it's staying out in front of those and building a team that is constantly thinking about what's going to go wrong, as opposed to being happy that nothing's going wrong. I think the other thing I would tell myself is, when things are quiet, it's good. So you don't always have to be in conversations and hearing noise and all that. Quiet is actually really good. It means you're not doing anything terribly wrong. The other part I would tell myself is, and I've done some of this, but I would say even earlier in your career in technology, is align yourself to the business. We are, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, technology touches every aspect of the business now, and we are so critical to how they run. You need to have build those relationships with business leaders, have the conversations, talk about where we're going, be involved in the business strategy, and really help the business organizations drive forward. We have to think of the technology organizations now as an extension of the business, as opposed to just something that keeps the business running.
All right. You heard it here, folks. Quiet is good. It gives you some time to think, and hopefully you won't drive yourself crazy. Hey, Ryan, thanks for being on the show.
Appreciate it, Mike. Enjoyed it.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotek conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotek conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotek conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotek conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. Our fantastic hosts brought us interviews with top professionals in the tech industry to keep you up to date. There was a lot of amazing content today, from interviews with Alan and Charlene to 3 episodes of View with Vizard. We'll be back again next week, so please join us for that. Once again, thanks for watching, have a good weekend, and we hope to see you again. As always, stay strong, Techstrong.